Around 10 million children around the world are not in school as a result of being married off as child brides, and that number is rising. Nearly 1 in 3 girls in developing countries will get married before the age of 18. Poverty, hunger, conflict, slavery and sexual violence are all contributing factors to the human rights abuse that is child marriage. Taking part in this discussion is Alamtashe Gibret-Kidan, founder of the Former Child Wives Foundation, who was married at 10 years old in Ethiopia. Margaret Owen, director of Widows for Peace Through Democracy. Kerrie Thornhill from the International Gender Studies Centre at Oxford University. Shazia Chowdhury, reader-in-law at Queen Mary University, London. And on the phone, Ellen Travers, programme officer at Girls Not Brides. Alim, I'd like to start with you. Would you mind sharing your experience with us?
I was married when I was 10 years old. And I had a child when I was 13 years old. And my husband, he was 16 when we married. And he left me with a baby child. He went to war. He died in war. He was 19 years old. It's very sad. I miss my education. I miss my childhood. I am destroying my life. I can read, I can write. It's very bad. Child marriage is very bad.
What was it like being pregnant at such a young age?
It's so painful. And I don't know, I am pregnant as well. It's very painful. And when I had a child, I was crying. I don't know what to do. And I disturbed my mom. And but on the top of that, my husband's dead. Everything is messed up. That's why now I'm campaigning against child marriage and to help as well the former child wife already they damaged their life and to get education to come out from this and to speak and to get help. That's my campaign against child marriage organization.
Do you know why you had to be a bride at 10 years old?
In Ethiopia, it's as a traditional. It's not forced marriage or it's traditional. So the people, they do like a traditional. To marry, to have children, that's...
Was your mother as young as you when she had her first child?
Yeah, I am the first child for her.
And was she 13 years old as well?
No, she was 15. She was 15 years old.
And now you have a son who is still in Ethiopia?
Yes, my son is in Ethiopia. My mom, she raised him and he's with her now.
Do you get to see him?
Yeah. I've been there many times.
And each time you return to the United Kingdom, it makes you want to campaign further to end child marriage. What do you see in Ethiopia?
This time, thanks for this government, it's control now. It's a law, 2001 exists already. But already, like me, before the law, they married. It's damaged them life. This is the former child wife. That's why I campaign to help them to come out and to speak and to get help.
How big is your charity and your campaign? What do you do in the United Kingdom to help raise awareness of child marriage?
And to help this. Already they are married. I have 27 child marriage already. They married. I have here to help them and to go to school, to get a job, because this times, the benefit cut, everything's, so they interrupt. So I said to them, come out and get help. It's not your choice. It's not your fault. This is a traditional. So come out and speak and get help.
And do they share the same feelings that you did? That you're
they share, but me, I came out and speak. But them, they shamed. They don't come out speak. That's why this organization to come out and to speak and to get help, to go school, to go to get a job. That's this my organization.
And education is really
important.
The key here.
Yes.
That's what the girls want.
Because if you don't write and read, that's blind,
Joining us at the other side of the table is Margaret Owen, Director of Widows for Peace Through Democracy. Having heard Alam's story there.
Well, I think you're so wonderful and brave to come out and speak, because you've actually been through it, and you've also hit the nail on the head, because you see how important it is. Education, keep the girls in school. I run this Widows for Peace Through Democracy, which focuses on widowhood in developing countries, and particularly in conflict-afflicted countries. And often people think that when we talk about widows, we're talking about old women. But widows are of all ages, and they include very young children. I mean, you could be a widow in Afghanistan, you could be 3 years old. And the terrible thing now, I really do admire your campaign, and I hope that we can work with you and help you, is that never before have we seen so many widows because of armed conflict, because of sectarian violence, because of harmful traditional practices where very young girls are married to much older men who then die. So we have more and more widows. And when you are a widow, what can you do? In so many countries, widows have absolutely no rights. So they're kicked out, or they're inherited by their husbands, brothers, or they're left to beg. And the first thing they do, the common coping strategy in so many developing countries, how do you survive? You take your children out of school, and if you have a choice, you take your girl child out of school and you get her married off because you can't afford to keep her, or you depend upon her child labour, looking after younger siblings, or being trafficked, prostitution. In Afghanistan, the widows are selling their little girls for $10. So I'm just so glad that you're doing this. And also, you talk about tradition, but tradition, as we've now got the new law, horrible laws in Iraq and all over the place, in fact, this is actually rape, because this sexual intercourse with a girl child who cannot consent, this is actually a form of rape. And it's terrifying now as we're listening to what's happening to all those girls in northern Nigeria who've been disappeared. I mean, I'll stop now, but actually I just mentioned that in June, this coming June, we've got the big global summit on preventing sexual violence in conflict, and we're doing a whole lot of fringe events. We're actually focusing on the linkages about widowhood, sexual violence and conflict, because when conflicts create so many widows, and the violence to women is endemic anyway in the societies. Widows and their young daughters are the most vulnerable to this terrible sexual violence. And to end before I start speaking now, I'm very old now, and I've been working on women's rights for years. We really need to have men and boys with us. How do we change these attitudes? How do we change traditions? Changing laws doesn't do anything. We really need to get a huge, much more international campaign, involve men and boys, because this terrible thing that happens to young girls and their children affects the whole of society and actually destroys lots of hope for a stable society and even for peace, because you have all these children who've never been to school, promoting inequality and poverty.
Well, you said, Margaret, about the effects of conflict on women and you mentioned northern Nigeria. Obviously, Foreign Secretary William Hague said these girls in Nigeria are being treated like spoils of war, sold off as slaves. Now, Kerrie, you are a researcher, a member of the International Gender Studies Centre. Now, is this the effect of conflict on women and women as a weapon of war? Is this an area of study that you've looked at?
Yes, it's a big part of my research. It's interesting that you should mention the terms spoils of war and weapons of war, and then also talk about post-conflict development. The reason I say that is there's been a lot of research over the past 20 to 30 years directed at sexual violence against women and girls in the context of armed conflict. And a lot of that has focused on what combatants do to enemy women. And what we see in a lot of post-conflict countries and conflict-affected regions is actually much more decentralized forms of violence. It's not just necessarily organized by one military or one rebel army, such as what we're seeing with in northern Nigeria right now, but actually increases in family violence, increases in sexual exploitation and abuse, increases also in sexual violence against men and boys. That too is something that much more academic attention has been directed towards. And so that's been a major challenge for a lot of organizations and individuals and activists who work in conflict-affected regions. You know, the whole spoils of war argument is very kind of historically rooted in, you know, armies going into an area and raping women as a form of conquest. But actually, a great deal of the violence that's really happening on the ground doesn't necessarily fit that pattern. And that's been the challenge for a lot of activists.
Now, we haven't heard from you yet, Ellen. Could you tell us about the global campaign Girls Not Brides and your reaction to what you've heard so far?
Girls Not Brides was initiated just over 2 years ago as a partnership of civil society organisations working around the world to both end child marriage and support married girls. And as we've heard earlier in the conversation already, you know, these girls in these situations, whatever that might be in whatever context, can be some of the most vulnerable girls and are often forgotten by mainstream services. And so one of the reasons for the initiation of the partnership was to bring together the organizations who are doing work on this issue and to try and share learning and promising practices about what's working in different countries. We know that the reality is it happens in different types of contexts, and that it cuts across countries and ethnicities and religions, but it's something which affects 14 million girls every year and has a devastating impact on their lives, because we know in many cases it means the end of education for girls. It means that they're having their babies early. It means the end of their own childhood. But I think what we're seeing and what's promising is that we are creating a movement to try and change, make sure that change happens at different levels, to make sure that it's on the agenda of international development negotiations, that on a national level that there are laws and policies in place and that they're implemented, and at a community level that there is programs that have been discussed already that are being supported and funded, so that we can support the people who are working in their communities to try and change norms and mindsets so that we can create a better future for girls.
Ellen, I mean, Desmond Tutu was quoted saying that he was committed to ending child marriage as he was to ending apartheid. I mean, how successful a campaign is Girls Not Brides, and is this something that you really think can change?
Absolutely. I think, you know, one of the things that we're already seeing is on the international stage that this issue is being put on the table. At the Human Rights Council, it's being discussed as an issue.